Russia bombs U.S. allied Syrian rebels, not ISIS fighters, inside Syria today, and catches the Obama administration flat-footed. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. You were just watching Secretary Kerry there at the United States with the foreign minister from Russia, Sergei Lavrov. Russia bombs U.S.-backed Syrian rebel strongholds in Syria today, backing up Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. To set the table here on a day filled with breaking news from the region, let's take a look back. 3 years and 1 month ago, President Obama said this about Syria's use of chemical weapons.
We have been very clear to the Assad regime, but also to other players on the ground, that a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. That would change my calculus. That would change my equation.
Chemical weapons were used, and in the weeks and months after that, the president repeatedly insisted Assad's days in power were numbered.
I am confident that Assad's days are numbered.
Fast forward to this week, and just 1 day after President Obama met with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, Russia acts on its own to start an attack, not on ISIS, but on Syrian rebels who want to take Assad out of power, including the U.S.-supported Free Syrian Army, leaving U.S. officials today scrambling. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Kevin Cork's at the White House with what appears to be a direct challenge to President Obama from the Russian leader. But we begin with national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon, who broke this story today on a day that began with a message from the Russians delivered, Jennifer, in a very unusual way.
That's right, Brett. A senior U.S. military source described the Russian appeal, known as a démarche, as curt, stern, and direct. The Pentagon, I'm told, was caught off guard.
The Russian warplanes began dropping bombs in Syria within an hour of a Russian three-star general entering the U.S. embassy in Baghdad and delivering a verbal démarche to the U.S. defense attaché, announcing that Russian airstrikes would begin soon, requesting U.S. warplanes stop flying in northern Syria. Sources with knowledge of the meeting said it was a tense conversation. The Russian general went on to say, "If you have forces in the area, we request they leave," which elicited this response from the defense secretary here at the Pentagon.
This is not the kind of behavior that we should expect professionally from the Russian military professionally, and that's one reason why I think it's a good thing to have an avenue of communication that is less unprofessional than a drop-in.
The secretary said he'd ordered his team to keep talking to the Russians.
I take the Russians at their word. My problem isn't that I don't understand what they're doing. I think my problem is that I think what they're doing is going to backfire and is counterproductive.
The first Russian strikes began near Homs, about halfway between Damascus and Aleppo in western Syria. According to reports, children were pulled from the rubble. The Pentagon says there are no ISIS targets in the cities where Russia is striking.
Everything was said by the Russian Ministry of Defense. Don't listen to Pentagon about the Russian strikes.
Russia's parliament authorized airstrikes this morning.
The support will be from the air without participation in ground operations.
But satellite images show temporary housing has been built for more than 1,500 Russian troops. Hundreds of those troops have already begun arriving in Syria. CENTCOM says U.S. warplanes will not comply with the Russian démarche. U.S. warplanes continued carrying out strike missions in northern Syria today, including one near Aleppo.
What we should be saying to Vladimir Putin is that you fly, but we fly anywhere we want to, when and how we want to, and you'd better stay out of the way.
The Russian general, Brett, was from that military cell that we first reported Russia established with Syria and Iran last week in Baghdad. Another surprise for the U.S. Embassy and the Pentagon.
We'll head back for any breaking details. Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Now to the politics and the policy of the Russian moves. The administration was caught by surprise, despite the fact Presidents Obama and Putin spoke face-to-face at the United Nations just Monday. Correspondent Kevin Cork has that part of the story tonight from the White House.
I believe there's an opportunity to be able to do to go down that political track because President Putin accepted the idea of a dual-track effort.
It may be a novel idea, but in practice, the Russians appear to have a one-track mind when it comes to Syria. Despite carefully coordinated bilateral meetings between Presidents Obama and Putin during the United Nations General Assembly and repeated phone calls between Secretary Kerry and his Russian counterpart, Moscow's decision to engage in airstrikes without informing the U.S. raises serious questions about the strength of the Obama administration and its strategy in Syria. The president has repeatedly called for the ouster of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, but years later those calls remain unanswered. 2 years ago, Mr. Obama said this:
"We both agree that Assad needs to go."
And on numerous occasions again this year, he said virtually the same thing.
It will not be possible to fully stabilize that country until Mr. Assad, who has lost legitimacy in the country, is transitioned out.
But analysts argue Assad's not going anywhere anytime soon. They say that's because under this commander-in-chief, the U.S. has given up its leadership role in the region, and Vladimir Putin, who backs Assad, has eagerly filled the power vacuum.
He's bidding for dominance in the Middle East against the United States, and he thinks he can prevail because he has a weak and feckless occupant in the White House.
The debate over what to do about Syria has even hit the 2016 campaign trail.
We spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives, wounded warriors all over, and Putin is now taking over what we started, and he's going into Syria, and he frankly wants to fight ISIS, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
White House officials, meanwhile, say Russia's aggression is a sign of weakness, not strength, and offered this warning today for the Kremlin.
Russia will not succeed in imposing a military solution on Syria any more than the United States was successful in imposing a military solution on Iraq a decade ago. And certainly no more than Russia was able to impose a military solution on Afghanistan 3 decades ago.
And Brett, as our viewers here on Fox News saw tonight, Secretary of State John Kerry, joined by his Russian counterpart, underscored the importance of maintaining a dialogue and in fact ramping it up to make sure that there is both operational cooperation as well as tactical and strategic cooperation in Syria. What he didn't say, however, tonight is why the Russians didn't reach out to the U.S. before they started their airstrikes in Syria today. Brett?
That dialogue was not open. Kevin Corrick live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thank you. As the focus today centered on Syria, another hot spot got even hotter: Afghanistan. U.S. forces are now engaged in firefights as Afghan troops try to recapture the city of Kunduz in the north from Taliban insurgents who seized that area Monday. Correspondent Connor Powell has the latest tonight from our Middle East newsroom.
Despite months of warnings that the Taliban were gaining strength in northern Afghanistan, Afghan security forces appear to have been caught off guard Monday when several hundred Taliban fighters stormed the city of Kunduz. As the Taliban expand their grip over Afghanistan's 6th largest city, government security forces are reportedly surrendering in droves, with insurgents capturing U.S.-provided equipment. Backed by U.S. airstrikes, Afghan security forces have launched a counteroffensive, but all the major strategic positions except the airport are now under Taliban control. In Kabul, Afghan lawmakers called on the pro-American President Ashraf Ghani to resign. It's been almost 72 hours, this Afghan member of parliament says, that people inside the city have been suffering from a lack of food, water, and electricity. Children and women are dying. American Special Forces soldiers are on the ground in Kunduz and, according to U.S. officials, are actively involved in the operation, including battling insurgents at the airport. Despite the worsening situation, the Pentagon continues to publicly support the Afghan military.
Obviously, this is a setback for the Afghan security forces, but we've seen them respond in recent weeks and months to the challenges they faced, and they're doing the same thing in Kunduz right now.
As more elite Afghan troops move from the eastern and southern part of the country to Kunduz, the counteroffensive should be able to root out the less equipped Taliban fighters. But the failure to protect a key Afghan city has already damaged the unstable U.S. strategy of training and outfitting the Afghan security forces.
There are roughly 10,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and the White House was hoping to reduce that number significantly in the coming months. The fall of Kunduz, though, will likely make that more difficult to do anytime soon. Brett?
Connor Powell in our Middle East newsroom. Connor, thank you. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says he is no longer bound by agreements signed with Israel. Abbas told the United Nations General Assembly today Israel's refusal to commit to agreements already signed has rendered the Palestinian Authority powerless. Shortly afterward, the Palestinian flag was raised at the United Nations for the first time. The U.S., Canada, and Israel were among the nations that voted against what is a symbolic gesture for a non-member state. Up next, we'll look at the latest batch of classified documents that went through Hillary Clinton's private email server. That's breaking this afternoon. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 25 in Oklahoma City with a last-minute stay of execution for convicted murderer Richard Glossip, who was scheduled to die this afternoon. Governor Mary Fallin issued a 37-day delay after the U.S. Supreme Court refused to intervene. Last night, Kelly Renee Gissendaner was executed in Georgia for the 1997 murder of her husband. Fox 59 in Indianapolis with the resignation of the #2 Republican in the State House there. Judd McMillan's announcement comes a week after he sent out a text saying his phone had been stolen and apologizing then to anyone who may have received any offensive material. A local newspaper reports a sexually explicit video was sent from the phone. And this is a live look at New York from our affiliate Fox 5. The big story there tonight, preparations for Hurricane Joaquin. It's said to be strengthening as it heads toward the central Bahamas. As you take a look at the track, some tracking models suggest landfall on the East Coast, possibly New Jersey, and that's later on in the week. That's tonight's live look. Outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.